Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Marcus Carlson. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund, who went from the frying pan into the fire last year. She was French finance minister when she became the head of the International Monetary Fund. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Now, this is the first time that we here at France 24 really get an opportunity to sit down with you since you became the head of the IMF. What's your number one lesson from this past year?
Be prepared. Be prepared for the unexpected. I don't think there has been any week without a new problem, a new issue, a new development in any corner of the world, and where we have not been asked to actually help, support, give policy advice, recommendations. So, yeah, be prepared. Anything can happen, that's what it is.
Anything can happen, and these past few weeks have been an example of that. We've seen a Greek election in which anti-austerity parties, they made real progress in the Greek electorate. They're against the bailout agreement with the IMF and with the rest of the Eurozone. Are you confident that Greece will fulfill that agreement?
Well, the agreement has certainly been endorsed by the then Parliament. It has been endorsed by the lead political parties of Greece then. So I had assurance from both PASOK and the Conservative Party that they would support the programme.
But of course, you're not getting that assurance from Syriza, the far left-wing party.
Correct, which was at the time, you know, a very, very small political party, and which is taking a major role in the current discussions, which is what I mean by be prepared. Anything can happen. We are clearly expecting the situation to settle. We very much hope that the Greek president will be able to form maybe a technical government for a period of time, pending any new election that would be decided later on. But from an economic point of view, we think that it is critical that the program could be continued because it was the commitment of the country and because it was clearly the very narrow path that we thought, together with the European Commission and the European Central Bank, the country could travel to recover and gain access back to market in a while.
But you say anything could happen. Does that include a Greek exit from the Eurozone?
We certainly don't hope so from the IMF point of view. But we have to be prepared for anything. As I said, you know, with endorsement by the PASOK and the Conservative Party, we thought that we had covered all the potential angles, and clearly that was not the case. So we have to be technically prepared for anything.
What happens to the global economy and what happens to the Eurozone economy if Greece has to exit?
The indirect consequences are very difficult to measure, let's face it. Greece is one set of things, one set of numbers, one set of potential damages, including for the country itself and for the Greek population. But the ramification, the spillover effects, the sort of chain of consequences that could result from that are very difficult to assess.
And what are they, though, in your mind at this point?
Well, you can think of all the contagion effects on other countries. You can think of clear financial turmoil, and as a result, you know, you have consequences on growth, you have consequences on trade, you have consequences on the financial markets. So, as I said, it's a multifaceted chain of consequences that are difficult to assess from a financial point of view. But we can certainly assume that it would be quite messy.
Now, you recently managed to convince IMF member nations to hike up the lending capacity of the IMF to more than $700 billion. Is that amount of money going to be enough?
It's more than that, actually. If you look at the total capacity to commit, including existing commitment, you talk about a little over $1 trillion. That's the total for the IMF, added to which members of the Eurozone have also decided to build up their line of defense and to have, you know, more resources available, with total commitment to the Eurozone of
Still,
about
though, there are plenty of people who are
$800
scratching
billion.
their heads at the moment and asking, is that going to be enough?
Yeah, that's always the job of journalists to actually do that. I mean, before the firewall,
We do a lot of head
before
scratching.
firewalls were erected, the big thing was, oh, they will never get there, nobody will agree, or the IMF will fail. So I think we have to take it one step at a time, build what needs to be built, and I'm certainly reassured by the willingness of my members to support that effort and to do more if necessary. That's what I have heard at the last spring meeting of the International Monetary Fund in Washington a couple of weeks ago.
How and when will you use this massive war chest that the IMF has at the moment? At what point? We are seeing, for instance, Spanish and Italian borrowing costs coming higher as the Greek drama plays out. As I say, how and when would you use that big war chest?
It's not resources for Europe. I just want to make that very clear. We have resources available for the entire membership. That's 188 members. So if any member of the organization needs help because of a balance of payment issue, or because it feels that it is doing all the right things, but the message is not well received by the investors, and therefore it needs what we call a precautionary instrument, then we have to be ready to support that member and to access to their request, provided that the conditions are satisfied. So we have currently, I think our largest program is with Mexico at the moment, which is of a significant amount. It's precautionary. It's in consideration for the fact that Mexico is doing all the right things. Now, if you look at the combination, correlation of risks at the moment, it is in the Eurozone. And certainly we are trying to help the Eurozone to address its internal issues. We're doing that on a troika basis, as we call it, because we act jointly with the European Commission and the European Central Bank.
Do you think
and we continue doing so.
Do you think there's a real risk that you'll have to step in, for instance, to help out Spain in the, let's say, next 6 months?
I certainly hope not. You know, I'm not desperate to spend that money. I'm not desperate to lend. I'm very keen that we be seen as a line of defense. I'm very keen that everybody knows that we have the firepower to help and to you know, restore stability where there is instability. But you know, I would hope as well that countries like Spain or like Italy can actually put in place programs themselves, as they are doing it. You know, addressing the issue of pension, retirement age, health cost, cost of education, labour market reforms. Those are things that Spain, for instance, is doing, is addressing. And Mario Monti in Italy is really looking at similar issues. So if they do that steadily, decisively, credibly, and at the same time keep their fiscal deficit under control and reduce it going forward, I would hope that this is convincing enough for market to understand that it's a sensible risk to take when lending to either Spain or Italy.
You're touching a little bit on my next question, because there is a debate here in Europe with austerity on the one side and growth on the other side. Yeah. Where are you, rather, in that debate?
I think that it's a fails debate. It's an easy one, clearly. You posture as a pro-austerity or you posture as a pro-growth.
It's another journalist headline.
But the reality, well, it's simple to explain, you know. There's Madame Austerity and there would be Mr. Growth. This is not the case, actually.
Mr. Growth being the new French president.
Possibly, but this is not the case. And, you know, if you ask them deep down, they probably both understand that there has to be a reconciliation between the two. And austerity and growth are not mutually exclusive. And they need to be addressed together, jointly. One will not go without the other, and vice versa. So our line on this is that while there has to be fiscal consolidation, and in some countries upfront and pretty loaded, there also has to be measures to accommodate and support growth, particularly anchoring structural reforms in the medium term so that the compost for growth is there, the facility to invest, the confidence for entreprise to actually create jobs.
Now, just to come back where we started this interview, you've been the head of the International Monetary Fund for around about 10 months now. Do you miss Paris?
Oh, of course you miss Paris. I mean, Paris is a beautiful city, and it's vibrant and it's gorgeous, and I miss friends as well. But you know, my life is somewhere else now, and
It's in Washington, D.C.
Well, I work out of Washington, D.C., but I travel a lot because we have 188 members, and sometimes they need me somewhere else.
Now, you watched the French presidential election from afar. I suppose it's fair to say that.
Yep.
Did you get itchy fingers at one point? Do you want to go back in domestic politics at one stage or another?
You know, my duty is to serve the membership as managing director of the IMF. But on occasions, I felt very tempted to go out and give a hand, but that's not in the cards.
That's where it stops at the moment.
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much, Christine Lagarde. It was a pleasure speaking to you. And thank you for coming on to France 24. You have been watching the interview here on France 24. Do stay with us. We have more news coming your way soon.